Orale! Bienvenidos and welcome to the Familia FFP podcast. This is Jorge Martin and Familia, we're on YouTube. Please give us a like and subscribe, por favor. Really appreciate it. And this is, I tell you, we've got a continuation of our NFL Insider Series. We're going down to Nolans today. And so, you all talk, this is going to be a familiar face from last year. And so, that there's going to be talk about food at some point later on. So, yes, we know. But first off, I just want to give you guys a quick shout out. Remember, when you go to fantasypoints.com, make sure you put in the promo code Familia22, Familia22, you get 10% off, and you got some of the best fantasy minds that are out there right now. Everything is in the middle of 32 articles, 32 days, 32 podcasts, all leading up to training camp. You got the key off-season moves. You got Scott Barrett's strength of schedule. You got Graham Barfield's pace and tendencies. Joe Dolan is killing it on his beat writer series. Similar to this one, I'm telling you, you got so much. You got John Hanson's final points, Tom Brawley, Wes Huber has been killing it. Familia, make sure. Familia 22, again, Familia 22 if you want to do it in Spanish, and get you 10% off. And like I said, we got a return guest. Mi amigo John Hendrix is back from Sports Illustrated, from a part of the Fan Nation Network. It's Saints News. He is one of the lead dogs on there. And I tell you, I mean, I had to have him back on because he just gave me such pretty much from training camp news and updates and analysis. And I mean, it was just such a pleasure, tan gran placer, had to bring him back. So mi amigo, John Hendrix, welcome back. Bienvenidos, estás en tu casa. Thank you for joining us.
Hola, ¿cómo estás? And thanks for having me. I appreciate it for sure. And definitely glad to be back here again for another year.
Awesome. And it's another year. It's a very different year. We've got a new coach. First off, how surprising was that for you that when that happened?
I think it was pretty surprising that Peyton stepped down, right? And not that it wasn't completely out of left field, but again, just kind of see some signs, and then after the news hits, it kind of makes more sense, if you will. And so, look, last year was hard, right? And you have the different starters at quarterback. I mean, you lost Jameis Winston. You had the quarterback battle. You go through pretty much 4 different quarterbacks. You have 53 plus different starters on the roster. I mean, COVID, you have all these challenges. And of course, everybody else around the league is doing it. But, for Sean and just kind of things that happen, I mean, this team was primed to make a run. And I think the biggest thing to take away is that, hey, all the stuff that they still had to deal with, they were still in a position to make the postseason. And it came down to that final week. They did what they had to do, but unfortunately it didn't go their way. So, look, it was really challenging. And look, I think that burnout is real. I think whether it's coaching, whether it's job, whether it's what we do, we all reach a stage where it kind of feels like we burn out a good bit. And so, look, I understand that. And when you do it for so long, you kind of definitely sympathize there and stuff. And so, look, I think Peyton, being in a broadcast setting, it's definitely going to be good. I don't know that he'll be back at coaching. I think that might be in his DNA and his blood that he might want to. But look, when you get to that booth, we've seen guys like Bill Cowher, that Tony Dungy, they get there and they're fine. They don't want to move back. And there's going to be some tempting offers, I'm sure. But, the Saints still have his rights. But that was surprising. But, man, they got a good successor for him, somebody who knows the organization, has been there 12 out of the past 16 years, knows how things are run and the expectations that go with it. And so I think this is a year where if you're sleeping on New Orleans, you're probably making a big mistake, because I think they're going to be in to shock a lot of people this season.
So, you mentioned the move to Dennis Allen, and obviously it's continuity. He was the defensive coordinator. He's got previous coaching experience. You also have Pete Carmichael as the new offensive play caller. When you're talking about change, such a change, someone from Sean Payton, who's considered an offensive genius, obviously, Drew Brees has so much to thank for him for his Hall of Fame career. But, Carmichael was in the room too, setting up so how much continuity can we see in the offensive game plan, the scheme, and kind of like a breakdown of how they're going to go run versus pass this year?
Yeah, look, so I think the biggest takeaway, first of all, is that the offense is going to run the same way it has been for the past 15, 16 years, right? And that's kind of been said and evident so far from everything we've heard, everything we've talked to Pete Carmichael, Dennis Allen, all these types of things. And so Pete Carmichael has been the offensive coordinator. He's been the guy that's been there for a long time. And, I think as I go about, I've had talked to former players. I used to do a podcast with Terrence Copper, great, veteran wide receiver in the league. It's hung around for 10 plus years. And, one of the things that even when he was early on the scene in New Orleans, I mean, he just talked about how authoritative Pete was and just how smart he is. And I think that's the biggest takeaway is how smart he is, kind of like one of those mad scientist type guys. And he's learned a lot. He's obviously knows what's expected in offense in New Orleans and such. And so, look, I think pass heavy is kind of the tendency maybe you want to look at, especially with some of these receivers that they've gotten building kind of this upgraded talent. And not to go on a tangent, but last year the offense was just horrible, right? I mean, it's the fact that you had such a talent deficient product at wide receiver, which made teams easier to key on Alvin Kamara. And Alvin Kamara had a down season, right? He, had some of his lowest totals. His touchdown ratio was way off from the year before, where he had gotten the end zone 20 plus times. I mean, there's just so many things that happen in that course. And so, look, some of it's continuity at quarterback. Some of it was not having the right receivers. Some of it was injury. Some of it was offensive line. I mean, you could put pretty much anything you want. And obviously these are professionals. They're not going to sit here and make excuses, but we know better, right? And so Carmichael's going to go in here. He's going to be smart. He's going to be very energetic. And I think he's one of those guys, just like a lot of these players on the roster, that he's going to come in and I think shock a lot of people. I think he's going to come in here and show people that, hey, this offense is still really capable. Obviously from a down season, that's kind of in the past, if you will, and behind you. Jameis Winston is the guy. He's going to go in there. He's working really strong alongside of Pete Carmichael. They're trying to come up with this thing together. And I think that's obviously another big takeaway is that Winston's more involved than he was and has probably ever been in anything, right? Because he knows he's the guy and that everything rests on him. And so Carmichael's going to be one of those guys that I think you see the genius kind of come out in some aspects. What I think that they're going to be missing in some aspects, though, is the fact that when Peyton was heading everything up, his tendencies, right? He was very aggressive on some of these calls and some of these fourth down calls. And so I think that's where big differences between him and Dennis Allen are. And what we got to see is going to happen is, if it's a 4th and 3, Peyton had no problem doing it, right? Because he knew what you didn't have a kicker that could do anything last year. Let's go for it because of the tendencies, right? And some of the analytics and charts behind that. I don't know what we'll see this season. And I think that's some of the cool unfactor or cool X factor that you just unknowns that you just don't know. Right. And so, but I think that all the players that we've talked to and I've talked to and coaches have given a very glaring vote of confidence for Pete Carmichael and a guy who's been around this organization and knows what to expect. So I don't think there's going to be much drop off here.
So let's talk about let's start with the guy who's going to be taking the snaps. And this year it's completely clear. I was listening last year. You called it right. It was going to be Jameis, and but it's his job. Taysom Hill is no longer in a quarterback battle. He's coming off the knee injury. So first off, I wanted to ask where he is on the rehab because I think when OTAs he was about 7 months past his injury, and I know they usually like 9 to 10 months. That's number one, and number two. Well, let's start with number one there.
Sure. His progress is great. So, I mean, he's been ahead of schedule and a lot of the milestones in his rehab. Look, I think a lot of people were making, especially, being out there and stuff, that people were making some big deals about a limp. And look, I mean, I don't know if anybody else that has had major surgery and things like that don't have problems afterwards. And it's part of the recovery process. I mean, I played hockey for 20 plus years. I broke my ankle. I limped heavily after I was back healed, if you will, and stuff. So, I mean, there's just all these things that come up. I say it was just pretty much overblown, but look, he's commanding the brace this season, right? And obviously recent kind of videos have shown him throwing without the brace and just not having it on. And look, again, that's encouraging because that means his knee is strong and where it needs to be. And he's always talked about, so he avoided major MCL damage last year. It was the ACL, right? And so that's where he had to repair the surgery. right now, what he explained to us a while back was that it's just the meniscus is trying to make sure that it heals properly and it is good to go from a strength perspective. And so that's kind of been the big thing. And it's not necessarily it's held him back, but it's just one of those he needs to make sure it's good to go before he does a lot more things. And just the fact that he was being out there and just kind of doing a lot of those drills, especially without the knee brace, is really encouraging for him. He's going to be 100%. I know it for sure starting week 1, but again, unless something wild changes, which I doubt it will, he's going to be wearing the brace this season. And again, it's just said nothing that's going to hinder him or anything like that. But, it's just one of those safety measures, if you will. And a lot of players do it, and he shouldn't have any problems with it. So he's good to go. He's going to be fine. And they're expecting a lot of big things out of him this season.
And you're right. It's not like he's Lamar Jackson who's going to be out there running a lot or something like that. So that's the big thing. Being ready to go. He did have a more conservative approach last year. Not throwing VAR down the field so much when, which is very different from what he was like in Tampa, where he was just a mad bomber, taking shots down the field. Are we going to see a little bit more of that in an offense that can be really explosive with when a quarterback is operating at a top level?
Yeah, look, I think when you look at his sample size last year, obviously, I think he did great. And if he was in there for all 17 games, the Saints would have made the playoffs. I mean, that was easily right what would have happened. I think when you look at it, they were kind of in this period where they were just kind of seeing how things were going. I think I say this in lack of better phrase, kind of like the training wheels were on a little for him, right? And then they were slowly coming off, and he was doing well. I think he was going through some of his reads. He was very talent deficient at wide receiver. He's talent deficient in a lot of areas, right? And so I think he was making the most of some of those decisions. He did have some of those deep shots that he was able to connect with, like Deontay Hardy and such, and just like the Washington game and some of these different ones that happened, Green Bay early on. But look, I think as far as where he's at in his chart and where he's going to go this season, I think that you can see a lot of things open up on the playbook, right? And I think one of the things that he didn't do last year that I think we'll see a lot more this season is kind of those shorter type of intermediary routes. And I mean, particularly using the backfield, because that's one of the areas where they had a lot of improvement. Kamara's receptions were down. His effectiveness was down in that terms in the passing game. It's something that he's talked about this offseason is just kind of going back to some of those Drew Brees films and some of those tapes that he's looked at and saying, hey, how can I use AK a lot better in the passing game? And I think that's going to be something added to this. And I think that's obviously something that's been missing, even when he was with Tampa. He had 2 great tight ends. He had some good wide receivers, some great wide receivers, right? And so he didn't really have a good complement in backfield. And that's something he has in New Orleans right now. And so obviously there's some things and factors that, we'll probably talk about with Kamara and legal process, Ingram aging a little bit, but on the surface right now, assuming nothing crazy happens and everybody's 100%, the sky's the limit, right? And again, you got more, some of your biggest factors coming back from a wide receiver perspective in Michael Thomas. I mean, that in itself, it's tremendously going to help this team. Then you get Chris Olave in the draft. I mean, this guy's looked outstanding. Jarvis Landry, you get him on a relatively hometown friendly discount. He looks rejuvenated. And I mean, so, just those 3 guys coming in as your top trio. Then you add in the guys that were in starting positions last year that are going to be your 4, 5, and 6 on the depth chart. I mean, Winston's got his pick of the litter, right? And I think he's in for a tremendous season, bounce back player, comeback player, whatever you want to say. I think he's going to fit the bill for a lot of that.
Yeah, normally I'd go to the running backs, but you touched on the receivers. There's so much intrigue about this group, such an influx of talent, especially if Michael Thomas comes back healthy. So I want to start with Michael Thomas. You had an article highlighting an Instagram post that he had showing him running routes. He looked clean. He looked good out there. He wasn't. I mean, I think it was like a 30-second Instagram. So, it's not like you're watching him at practice, but. What do you see as his prognosis for being ready for week 1 from what I know they're always conservative about these things, but after missing all of last year and most of 2020, what's his outlook for coming back and possibly being a bargain in fantasy?
Yeah, would be completely, utterly shocked if Michael Thomas is not on the field starting in week 1. I don't see a scenario where that's happening. Just because the way the rehab has gone, all these other things, whether it's a setback or all these types of stuff. Look, he's been in the facility. He's been working his butt off. He's been in there doing what he's supposed to from a rehab perspective. Just today he was just showing a video where he's working alongside Chris Olave. They're putting in work together. He's running. He's doing these routes, and I think that's the encouraging thing is that look, he's making his presence felt. I don't expect him to be this guy that comes into training camp day one and is somebody that, you see 100% of Michael Thomas. I think that they want to ease him because they know how important this guy is to their offense and what they do. And, he hasn't got a chance to work with Jameis Winston really. And the thing is, Winston's really excited. I mean, last year even coming in, he's super excited to work with Michael Thomas. And so again, I would say from a fantasy perspective, I don't know if you can expect the 2019 production. I just don't see that as a reasonable, but this is a guy, assuming he's healthy, which I believe he's 100% going to be 100% going to week one. Target share, I don't see there's any reason why he can't be 1,000-yard guy, a 10 touchdown guy, maybe upwards of 80 to 100 receptions. I think he's got a tons of upside. And if you're drafting, whether it's dynasty, keeper, or regular formats, if you got him in the mid to late rounds, you better go look at him because I think Chris Olave is another guy that's going to obviously cut into targets. Same thing with Jarvis Landry, but I feel really good about Thomas being that number one guy. I don't see much of anything that's going to hinder you from having to scare away from him.
So I think it's pretty clear he's going to be the number one guy. Wide receiver one, assuming health. So let's look at Jarvis Landry, proven veteran, slot guy who's just going to get a ton, who's gotten a ton of volume both in Miami and in Cleveland, and Chris Olave, one of the smoothest. I mean, they talk so much about smooth route runners, just a really beautiful ball, wide receiver coming out of Ohio State. A lot of times rookies start off slow. So can you see the pecking order going Landry and Olave, with Olave catching up there toward the latter half of the season?
I think Olave is going to have a better start to the year than some people are probably thinking about, just because here's why I say that. So yeah, smooth, the route running, all that. I mean, he just makes everything look effortless. Right. And so why I say that is because from day one that he's worked with Jameis Winston, he's come up to him and said, hey, what can I do? How can I do this better? What can I do to be in the right spots? Where do you want the ball at? Where do you need me to be? All these types of things. And, again, it seems kind of like, okay, well, given, but it's a way a professional, veteran type of player would act, as a rookie. So many things, and again, I'm not picking on Ian Book here, but last year he had struggles with the playbook, right? And so some of these rookies come in and they're just trying to survive and trying to catch on and adapt, and it's a hard thing to do, and especially for a receiver. But we've seen a lot of success. Justin Jefferson is a guy that's just blown it up. Jamar Chase, a lot of these guys that have come in and have made such a huge impact as a rookie. I'm not saying Olave is going to be the offensive rookie of the year or anything like that. I think he has a good, strong chance. But, honestly, from a target share reception perspective, I think you can look at him easily 4 to 6 times. I think he's going to get some good looks, especially if Michael Thomas is 100%, and you got Jarvis Landry, a veteran out there, and you got Olave, and then you have a Kamara on the field, assuming that you get the protection, what you want, and the looks and the timing. I think that these defenses are going to be pretty confused with a 100% offense the Saints can throw at you. And so I think that's going to open up Olave a good bit. I think he's great as far as his hands go. Everything that we've seen from him and then some, the guy just comes in and just works. He's just such a blue-collar worker, and he just, again, makes it look effortless. And I think that he's a guy, especially if you're in a dynasty league or if rookie only, I think he's one of your first round picks, easily one of your first picks that you look at if you're trying to fill out that roster, if you will. And so I think he's in for a pretty strong season. And look, the Saints wide receivers production, you look at last year, was the worst they've ever had under Sean Payton. So it was tough to watch. And I think that all three of these receivers, look, they could flirt with 1,000 yards this season. And, of course, a lot of that hinges on Jameis Winston, hinges on the offensive line protections. I mean, there's so much that hinges on. But if you tell me that all three of these guys wouldn't have 1,000 yards at the end of the season plus, I would kind of be surprised. But, easily in that 750-plus range with a few scores is very modest projection for Olave.
Yeah, that would be fantastic, especially getting, because I think that's great for a rookie. And when you were talking just now, I had a flashback to Calvin Ridley's rookie year where he had Julio Jones on the other side. So he's taking that big, he's taking the number one DB, and ended up with 10 touchdowns as a rookie. And when a healthy Michael Thomas is going to draw the number one DB and so Chris Olave and Jarvis Landry being such a technician. But I mean, I think that's opening up a lot of opportunities. And if Jameis is anywhere, takes the next progression and starts going in the intermediate routes and maybe some deep shots. Olave is one of the guys that he's going to be taking. I think he's one of the fastest receivers at the combine. So, hey, okay, you convinced me. You convinced me to take an early shot on him.
Yeah, and look, I'd say this, and sorry, just to say on Jarvis Landry, he's looked absolutely reinvigorated. He looks like he's a guy that's going to come in here and do extremely well too. So, and he's in a contract year, obviously taking that 1 year deal. And it's one of those that, hey, I'm betting on myself to try to secure a next bigger contract, right? And so I think that you can expect a lot of big things from Jarvis Landry. Just him and Tyrann Mathieu just coming back to Louisiana has been such a huge, like, you could just see the energy. You could just see the determination. You could just see that's how people are just riding the high there. So I think Landry's in for a strong season. Again, wide receiver 3 when you look at the grand scheme of things, but he's a guy that's going to be in the slot. I expect him to move the chains a good bit. I expect him to be that guy that, hey, if all else fails, he's a guy that I can just lean on and to turn or, to move, pick up a few yards here and there. And look, I think he's going to try to get to that spot where he's, he hasn't been 1,000-yard receiver in a couple seasons. He's got a lot to prove here. And so I think he's going to be a weapon that Winston's going to use, and that's a chemistry that's going to just, only flourish as we get further along in the training camp process and as we get to the regular season.
Well, we also know that Jarvis Landry likes to bless him. So, oh yeah, that was a beautiful Hard Knocks. I want to go to the running backs now. Alvin Kamara from the Pro Bowl. There is the legal situation that's that is coming up out of the fight. The NFL as of this recording, which we're recording on July 7th, there's nothing yet on him. It's hard to look in the crystal ball and say there's going to be a suspension, how long that suspension is, what any tea leaves that you're reading that says what could be happening with him in late July, August, when the NFL comes down with discipline, if it comes down.
Yeah, so the first thing to know is that his hearing is August 1st, right? And so this has already been postponed and pushed back a couple of times. So maybe we'll get some more clarity on August 1st. But, it's I say that because you got another player that's worried about some of the potential league discipline in Marcus May, a guy they picked up in free agency who's going to be starting in their secondary. He has an offseason arrest from February 2021 that still hasn't been fixed or has not been resolved. And his next court date is also on August 1st, right? And so they have 2 players that have kind of some legal stuff that's not been fixed up yet. And I'm not saying that Kamara, his case won't continue to be the same way or that whole thing, but you got something that happened in February 2021 that still hasn't been put to bed. And obviously that has to be resolved first until the NFL comes down and does their legal type of discipline. Now with Marcus May, it's pretty straightforward. A DUI, new CBA, that's a 3-game suspension. We'll see how that plays out. I think that's probably a little bit more straightforward than Kamara. With Kamara, there's more people involved, and I don't know how that's going to particularly play out. I know the video and everything I've heard and seen doesn't look particularly favorable, but then again, we just don't know because the last time that this all came about, the defense said they needed more time to analyze the video and just kind of look at some of the evidence that's been presented. And so I think that, there's been a lot of things that have said that, hey, Kamara's bracing for a 6-game suspension. Then Kamara claps back and says, I don't know what y'all are talking about. What crystal ball you got? Can I get the Powerball numbers and stuff? And so, look, I would expect that no matter what, that you're going to have some type of discipline for Alvin Kamara. The extent of that is unknown. And even if they get everything they need from a legal perspective on August 1st and all that's resolved, the NFL is not exactly swift with their discipline. So I would probably anticipate more of a later season suspension. or it might carry over. At worst case, it would be in the playoffs if the Saints, were able to get back in and such. But that would be horrible timing. But at the same time, this is how this stuff tries to play out. You're still dealing with all this fallout with the Deshaun Watson stuff. That's probably center stage and priority right now, number one for the NFL. But look, I would say that August 1st is your next big date. We'll have to see if that actually produces anything or we get another postponement. And so if it postpones, Kamara will probably be good for another few months to be on the field. But, as it lingers more and more, we'll see how it all plays out. But I don't think it's really from an organization standpoint, we'll just have to wait and see. We just don't. That's really all it is. We got to wait till the legal process plays out, then NFL discipline, and then we'll figure out where we're at with Kamara.
How about as a player? I mean, it was a tough season for him, and you talked about the fact that the downgrade in talent at wide receiver because of injuries and everything else really focused the defensive attention on him. He's one of those running backs that tends to age well, a guy who catches passes, doesn't take so many big hits, doesn't get so many car crashes. Is he, when he's on the field, are we still looking at the same Alvin Kamara and maybe even, with defenses not being able to key on him this year as much as they did last year?
Yeah, look, I think the best thing for him is don't give him 20 plus carries a game. That doesn't make sense to me. And, I think that's tough to look at him last year and know that, hey, Kamara having 20 plus carries in games. And again, he's built for it. He can do it. But obviously, when you don't have a solid backup plan, I mean, last year they were rolling in with Tony Jones Jr. because, Latavius Murray got cut in camp. They cut Devontae Freeman as well because of the way Tony Jones Jr. was playing. And so come to the offense, the season, it's hard not to put 41 on the field. And so, again, I say all that to say that, that's one of the reasons they traded for Mark Ingram. They got good value out of it. Ingram comes back, it kind of helps take off that load. But a lot of that was, some of his production, lack of production, is the offensive line shifting. I mean, they lost everybody except Cesar Ruiz, and that was probably about it. You lost Teron Armstead for games. You lost Ryan Ramczyk. You lost Andres Pete, Eric McCoy even for a few games, right? And so, it's never ideal because that was a strength going into the season. Cesar Ruiz is a guy that has struggled a good bit. He's trying to find his niche. And so I think Kamara is in for a better season, especially because, offensive line perspective, you have lost Teron Armstead, but, you got Doug Marrone as far as a coach goes. I think he's primed for some really good improvement there on the offensive line. Ryan Ramczyk's going to be good to go from his offseason surgery. You got kind of some things to figure out at left tackle and even in guard position. I think some of those guys can get pushed a little bit, but I say all that to say that a lot of this hinges on, Winston or Kamara on the offensive line. I feel like if I was just in a betting mode that I would take the over on how they're going to do, is I think their productions will be better just because the way the offensive line is shaped up. And then Kamara's usage will be what it needs to be. And you don't have to rely on him for 20 plus carries a game and get him more involved in the passing game where it's not so obvious. And I think he's going to do much better this season in terms of production.
So I want to stick to the offensive line for a second. Lost Teron Armstead, and you mentioned Cesar Ruiz had a rough year, and there were injuries all around. It's a group that was ranked number 21 going into the season by PFF. This has been traditionally a strength of this team when it's going well. Obviously, drafted Trevor Penning in the NFL draft. Could this group be poised for a bounce back?
Yeah, I would say so. And look, I think when you talk about Penning in left tackle, he's going to have to take that job from James Hurst. And I think James Hurst has earned a shot to start for this team. He's a kind of a quiet leader, but he's very smart. He's very intelligent. I think he's earned a legitimate shot to start, and it won't be surprising to see him starting in week one. Penning is a guy that I think has got a bright future. I think he's outstanding as far as his run blocking goes, his physical attitude. Mauler mentality is what you hear. He's got to refine a little bit in the pass protection. I think is where he's got to grow the most. And for that fact, you got Hurst that's going to anchor that left side. Andres Pete's coming back from an injury. And the thing is with him, he's yet to ever play in a full season, and you got to have a solid backup plan to him. And I feel like they do with Calvin Throckmorton. And so with Ruiz, I think he's kind of the wild card here. Eric McCoy's going into a contract year. I think he's going to be fantastic. He's always been really strong for this team. Ryan Ramczyk at right tackle. They missed him last season. It was just hard to watch it sometimes for this team in the offensive line. But I do think they're in for a bounce back. I think the depth behind them is a lot better than it has been. But the key is always health and availability. And so if something happens to one of those starter guys, you got to have a solid backup plan. I think they have some pieces in there, but I feel like, if it starts getting to 3 and 4 on the depth chart in some of these areas. And the thing is with New Orleans, you always cross train. So it's like whoever plays guard can play tackle, and whoever plays tackle can play guard. They got a lot of these that shift, or some play guard and center. And so if it breaks down too much, then I'm going to be a lot more concerned here for New Orleans. But if everything is the way it should be on 100% on paper, then I think there's no reason to expect this group not to rebound as well.
I got one other question about the running backs. After Kamara, what's the pecking order, kind of like in case of emergency?
Yeah, so it's Mark Ingram. And look, I think Mark has a lot left in the tank. And, I would tell you, if you're talking fantasy, if you're taking Kamara, you better take Ingram, right? And you got to have the handcuff, just because you don't know what's going to happen with this legal process. And look, I think Ingram is a guy that, when he needs to, if he's got to step up, he's going to step up. And after that's just where it gets a little bit concerning. They had David Johnson come in at minicamp, couldn't get a deal done because they couldn't agree on some of the money. Maybe they revisit that a good bit, but it tells me that they're definitely still a little bit concerned, or at least they're going to add somebody. And they did this last year in camp. They added Devontae Freeman. And so Freeman didn't make the team, but he did latch on in Baltimore, and played a good bit of games for them. So I would expect them to look and do some due diligence. I wouldn't rule out them looking at trading for somebody if something crazy happens. And so, but as it stands right now, it's a lot of special teams guys. So it's Tony Jones Jr., a guy that looked really good in training camp last year, got hurt early on in the season, and then he came back. He just wasn't the same guy. Dwayne Washington has been more of a special teams guy. He's carried the ball a little bit. Devin Ezigbo is on another stint with the team. They picked him up from Jacksonville, poached him from the practice squad, and he's kind of hung around a good bit, and he could carry the ball too. But I think of those guys, is that a good 3 option? Probably not the strongest one. I'm intrigued by their undrafted rookie they got out of Baylor, Abram Smith. I think he's a guy, a converted linebacker. He offers a tremendous amount of upside on special teams. And so I think he's more of a bruiser, more similar, I think, to Mark Ingram, if anything. So I would be interested to see how he can push some of these other guys on the depth chart, if you're trying to look at somebody maybe as a sleeper or somebody to just kind of watch on the roster. But to say the least, if something happens to Kamara, something happens to Ingram, this team is kind of screwed at running back. But I would just, to be blunt, that's just kind of where I look at it. Not that these guys can't do it, but it's harder for them to do the things they want to do if they don't have a guy like Kamara, Ingram on the field or available.
Yeah, that's when Jameis goes into Mad Bomber mode, back to his Tampa days, right? We haven't touched on the tight ends yet. Last year there was a lot of talk about Adam Trotman coming into the season. Obviously, the issues, the lack of continuity at quarterback kind of hindered that. What kind of outlook do we have at tight end this year, starting with him?
Yeah, look, I think Trotman, I thought he was somebody, and a lot of us thought he was going to break out for a strong season, and just this wasn't there. And last year, the way this team started, there was a lot of drops. There was a lot of just ugly football, right? And so Trotman was in that group. They signed Nick Vannett, free agent guy. He missed half the season. First half of the season, he only played in 7 games for him. You didn't have Taysom Hill really 100% available playing there, and Jawan Johnson was a guy who kind of started hot and fizzled out and cooled down a lot in a big way. And I think that was a lot into terms of, quarterback continuity. If there's one group that I'm most concerned about on offense, it's tight end. I just don't know if they got enough there. They're banking on Taysom Hill to come and kind of be more of a permanent guide in that particular role. But he is coming off a Lisfranc surgery, right? And so that is tricky. He was, again, guy that's been around the building, rehabbing, doing it to facility work. And I won't be surprised to see him start the season on the PUP or start training camp on the PUP, physically unable to perform list. But how that turns out for him, I know he's meeting in the tight end room, a tight end group, something he's never done, right? And so I think that bodes well for him and learning the position a lot more. I think he's got upside there. Now, am I telling you he's going to be the next George Kittle? No, not even close, not even a resemblance of that. He's not going to be in their top 5 elite. I think he can be good, but the thing is, the Saints have tried getting tight ends to measure up to the Jimmy Grahams for years, and they just haven't done it. They've tried Kobe Fleener, Ben Watson. I mean, even on the back half of his career, did pretty good. You get guys like Jared Cook, did decent, came into his own and after a slow learning curve. But, at the tight end position, I think Trotman probably be right now in your top as far as pecking order. Taysom Hill would be, close second, could be borderline top option. But if I'm a fantasy guy and I'm looking at any of them, I would stay away until that situation works itself out. So more information is needed at the tight end group is what I would just tell you.
Do you think Taysom will have some plays where he's kind of like a wildcat, and or are they just going to strictly play him at tight end?
No, I think you can still expect him to see some on some powers, some short yardage situations. Not that it's going to happen every time, because no matter what, like last year, if it was a short yardage situation, he's going to go in there as a power guy or, for short yardage and stuff. And so I don't know if you'll see as many of them this year, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him there. I think he's going back to more of that jack of all trades where he'll play special teams. He'll play on the punt team. He'll play on the kickoff team. He'll play a tight end. He'll play wherever he needs to, right, to just be on the field. And so, that'll remain to be seen. But, I wouldn't rule out him trying to get some of those short yardage and power situations like he did last year and has done for so long.
Awesome. Well, one last one about the defense. I know they'd love to play Tampa Bay every week of the season. It seems like all they do is like shut down. They're the only kryptonite for Tom Brady. When you look at how does this team shape up? It's been traditionally a great team against the run. How do they shape up against the pass?
Yeah, look, here's the big things. Obviously, the question marks is you lost your two best safeties, your two starting safeties, and Malcolm Jenkins lost him to retirement. Marcus Williams goes to Baltimore, right, on a free agency deal. Not surprising. So the Saints were kind of up a creek without a paddle there, but obviously they made the first offseason move by getting Marcus May. He's coming off of an Achilles injury, so Achilles. And so ACL. Anyways, it's irrelevant because he's there, he's on the field, and he's obviously doing the rehab and putting the work in, and he's going to be one of the starters, right? And then they get Tyrann Mathieu, and Matthew's a guy that's going to come in here and just really do some outstanding things. I think those two are your favorites to start. CJ Gardner-Johnson is your guy that kind of mans the slot, obviously in the nickel situations. But, beyond that, I think the safety spot is where they're deepest at in terms of the roster. I mean, they've got PJ Williams, they brought him back. They picked up Daniel Sorensen, a veteran guy that's been around for a lot of years. Justin Evans is a guy they signed as well, who is kind of revitalizing his career, coming back to football. And they have another guy to watch out for, which is kind of a sleeper, is Bryce Thompson, guy that can line up at various positions, who's turned a lot of heads at minicamp and OTAs. And so I say all that to say that between the secondary and the corners, you got Lattimore returning. You've got a Debo that's obviously going to be in for an even larger role. You still have Bradley Roby. You've drafted Delonte Taylor, who's looked phenomenal as far as probably one of the best rookies that they've had in terms of how he looks. Their secondary's good. Linebackers, when you look at Demario Davis, everybody's waiting for his age to catch up to him. Hasn't happened yet. I don't think it's going to happen this season. They don't re-sign Quan Alexander. You get Pete Werner in the building, right? And so, or in his second year, I think he's in for a big season. I think he's going to do extremely well against the pass, and just because his sideline speed, just kind of his burst that he has, and then obviously against the pass, their pass rushers are outstanding. I mean, when they're healthy, they're six deep right now, and they're all six could start and do extremely well. So Cam Jordan, Marcus Davenport is kind of the question mark. I think he's going to be ready for camp. He's a guy going in a contract year. I think he's going to look outstanding this season. Peyton Turner's been cleared, medically cleared from a shoulder surgery. He's going to be good to go. You have Tano passing off still. You have Carl Granderson, who looked outstanding at camp. And then you also have Taco Charlton, who you brought in as a free agent. If you look at any area, any area where you might be a little bit concerned on the pass, I think it's the interior on the defensive line. They didn't get a lot from David Onyemata last season. He served a 6-game suspension to start the year. Just wasn't as effective as he was the season before. Shai Tuttle's a guy that kind of familiar and starting with alongside him. But you have some unknowns. Albert Huggins. They picked up Jalil Johnson in free agency. Kentavious Street. They still have other guys on the roster. Jordan Jackson's another one that they picked up in the draft. So I think that's an area they can get a lot better at. And again, it's if you had Aaron Donald's on your team, it's a big win, right? But that's not an area the Saints do. You know, it'd take probably 5 of them to equal one Aaron Donald right now. And so I think that's where you look at this being the biggest question mark on this defense, specifically against the pass. I know they can plug the run, but, you know, that'd be where I would say in a nutshell how you would assess the Saints defense right now.
Awesome. Mi amigo, you just knocked it out of the park. Thank you. I mean, I'd say this was super, but you know, you've got enough. You hear enough of Superdome. So, I wanted to finish off. You mentioned Taco Charlton. I was listening back to our interview from last year. You gave such an incredible breakdown of the taco scene in New Orleans. Any new spots? And number two, that's number one. And number two, I got family that's going to be passing through for one day. So if you got 2 places to recommend, it doesn't have to be Mexican, anything that they got to try. I'm going to make sure they know about the taco place, but
Okay.
anything new on the taco front, and then 2 places that they got to go to.
I wouldn't say too much on the taco front. I mean, I'm Honduran myself, so there's some places on the North Shore called Balietas and Jorge's that are outstanding as far as Honduran and even some type of Cuban food. And so those are 2. But if you're looking at New Orleans, some must-haves, the Ruby Slipper is one of the best brunch spots that you could ever go. Willie Mays, that's awesome, outstanding spot to go to as well. Those would be the 2 that I'd say you probably have to. You know, I know most people when they go to New Orleans, they look at beignets or Cafe du Monde, which is great. But some of these more local spots are probably what I'd look at. Just, you know, if you can go to Ruby Slipper and eat some brunch, you'll be very happy and even more, I think I would say. And then, you know, man, I'm just trying to think it depends if they're doing fine dining or if they're just wanting kind of some spots. But Willie Mays, Ruby Slipper, I think those are 2 of the ones I would say. If they even want barbecue, Blue Oak Barbecue would be another place I'd look at. If they like burgers, go to Company Burger. That'd be another one. So between those, I think it's plenty to probably keep your family very happy, filled, and you know, excited for this trip.
Oh man, well, this was an exciting update on the Saints. Mi amigo, thank you so much. Thank you
No
so
problem.
much. I want you to plug anything you got coming up leading up to training camp. Feel free. I'm going to put your feel free.
Sweet. Well, yeah, definitely. Just follow us on Twitter, you know, or just follow me, and then just come check out our work at Saints News Network. Saints.media is probably the easiest way you can access it. But, you know, also what I would tell you is that I'm doing a lot more video work with Brute Crew Media this season. That's probably going to be most exclusive things. So check us out there. We have a lot of things, and it's not just Saints, it's Pelicans, it's fishing, it's anything you want to know is wrapped up. If it's college, if it's different sports, I mean, we've got it all wrapped up into Boot Crew Media. So check us out there. Check me out. So like and find us on YouTube, and then, you know, just keep up with all the work that we do. And I appreciate all the supporters and all the help and all the listens, downloads, whatever it is, flare signals, just kudos. It doesn't matter. I appreciate all the work because I'm not here without any of you guys and supporting me.
Yeah, believe me, the stuff that they got coming out is fantastic. I've been consuming it all over the place. I'm going to make sure to give a like and subscribe to the what's the YouTube page?
So it's just Boot Crew Media. So I can tweet it out with it, or just Boot Crew Media. And crew we're New Orleans, so it doesn't spell the right way, but it's Krewe. So it's not crew like you're thinking. It's Boot Crew. And then, so, you know, they do a lot of good work for sure.
Yeah, I saw that it's in your Twitter bio. So yes, definitely, familia. Give them a follow, and please, otra vez, give us a like and subscribe on YouTube too. So everybody, likes and subscriptions for everybody on YouTube. Por favor, go to Familia FFB. Also, again, go to fantasypoints.com. Make sure you put in your promo code Familia22, Familia 22 in Spanish. Get 10% off. Again, you got so much great content we're getting you ready for your fantasy football drafts, familia. It's getting to be redraft season. All 90% of you are coming back to this. Follow this NFL Insider Series. We're almost halfway through all 32 teams. Con mi amigo John. Oh, thank you so much. And everybody, also, please, if you want to get the audio version, go to Anchor, get us through Apple, Google, Spotify. Just put Familia FFB and familiaffb.com for original content. Otra vez, to our guest, our invitado de lujo, John, muchas gracias. And to you, everybody, thank you so much for following. And remember, todos somos familia. Salud.